Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 358. So with all of the excitement around the fact that the prosecution met with the survivors last Thursday, there was a little nugget about Ghislaine Maxwell and her attempt to keep documents sealed that sort of slipped under the radar. Now, I had this one filed the day it came out on November 13th, but like I said, I prioritized and we dove into the situation with the prosecutors not being forthcoming, let us say. And I felt that deserved a deeper analysis, so we spent a few days talking about that and adding context. But don't think I let this one slip by, because I didn't. And with today being a relatively slow day considering the ground that we covered this morning, I figured it would be the perfect time to talk about the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team are once again throwing some shit at the wall, hoping some of it sticks. But I have a funny feeling that once again they're going to catch a fat L and that the courts are not going to rule in the favor of Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team. So let's jump into this article from heraldmailmedia.com, and the headline is Jeffrey Epstein associate, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scuzzbag and bipedal serpent, Ghislaine Maxwell fights to keep sexually charged testimony sealed. So right from the headline, you know exactly what we're talking about. There's more documents that are on their way. We talked about that recently as well, how there is a document dump that should be coming any time now. And you see Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team here once again scrambling, trying to get some of the more salacious bits kept under seal and out of the public view. This article was authored by Kevin G. Hall and Ben Weeder. This article was published on November 13th. Attorneys for Ghislaine Maxwell, alleged co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scuzzbag and bipedal serpent, and disgraced financier, pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, filed an objection late Thursday seeking to block release of a controversial, sexually charged deposition in a settled civil lawsuit. Now again, remember, there are layers to all of this, and Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team will do whatever they can and whatever they think is necessary to try and keep as much of this hidden from the public as possible, because they know it's damning, they know it looks really bad for them, and they know that it's going to just simply prove what the survivors are saying to be true. And when you look at everything in context, all of the circumstantial evidence, and then what we have been provided as far as the documentation dump thus far, and you start putting those pieces together, well, the puzzle starts to be a bit clearer, right? And it's obvious that Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team understands the stakes, and they understand the fact that the stuff that is contained within not only the things that she's trying to block, but within all of the documents overall, it really does nothing to further their cause or try and help them prove that their client is innocent. Because remember, like I've been saying, in my opinion, they're not trying to prove that their client's innocent here. They're looking for technicalities and loopholes. The objection was filed as part of a broader objection to the proposed timeline for unsealing additional documents as required in a July ruling by U.S. District Judge Judge Preska in a records release lawsuit brought by the Miami Herald. So again, even though Preska has ruled for this stuff to be released, even though the Second Circuit Court of Appeals has sided with the release of the deposition, again, Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team are going through the motions. Do I think they'll be successful? No, I do not. Not at this point. At the stage we are at right now, they'd have to bring something pretty significant to the table to try and get things turned in their favor, right? Because as of now, the evidence is damning, according to Preska and according to Judge Nathan. So the defense is going to have to pull a rabbit out of their hat if they're going to want Preska to block any of these documents coming out, because I think Preska is determined to get this show on the road at this point. The Thursday filing seeks to block release of a July 2016 deposition given by Maxwell in a civil lawsuit involving Epstein accuser Virginia Roberts. So this is the second part of that deposition that she's trying to get blocked here. Preska last month released a long transcript of a Maxwell deposition from April 2016 in which the British socialite, bipedal serpent, with 3 passports was obstructive and refused to answer questions about her sexual behavior and that of Jeffrey Epstein. Her refusal to answer questions, which stemmed from allegations of Epstein survivors, led a judge to order Maxwell to sit months later for the follow-up deposition. So this is part 2 of the actual first deposition, right? We know that Ghislaine Maxwell was very coy in her answering questions the first time around. We know that she wasn't being honest, and we know that she was being cautious. Well, she thought she was being cautious with the questions that she answered. And even with all of that, even being so against the process and being well coached, she still got nailed for 2 instances of perjury. And again, that is something that Prince Andrew, aka the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family, is in serious jeopardy of as well. And that's why he does not want to sit down with investigators the way Ghislaine Maxwell did. Maxwell was arrested this summer on federal sex abuse charges in connection to her association with Epstein, a multi-millionaire, pedophile, scuzzbag, dirtbag, with palatial homes in Palm Beach, Florida, the Virgin Islands, New Mexico, and Manhattan. Releasing the second deposition, something that was expected in the next 2 weeks, would damage Maxwell's chances at a fair trial, her lawyers said. And there you have it, right from the Miami Herald. In the next 2 weeks, this second deposition is expected to hit the ground running, just like I thought. When you start to see all this smoke and you start to see the action going on behind the scenes, it's almost a sure bet that there's going to be something significant coming down the pipe. Now, is that always what happens? No. But what has been proven time and time again to be a pretty surefire way to sniff something out, it's usually this. When you start hearing about, a couple weeks, there's lawyers meeting with the survivors, you have the fund that's kicked in and it's supposedly paying out money already, and you have the reports now of other co-conspirators that are facing arrest possibly very soon. So there is a lot going on here, folks, and I expect this case to expand and in a very rapid manner once we start seeing these other arrests. There can be no doubt that matters concerning Miss Maxwell's case have been excessively and extensively reported. Yeah, now, after it was covered up by every single one of these legacy media scoundrels for all of these years, now their hands being forced because the pressure has been put on them by independent content creators and, more importantly, by folks like you who are out listening to this podcast right now. These people didn't want anything to do with this Jeffrey Epstein case. They didn't want to out their friends. They didn't want to out their buddies. But they have no choice at this point. Zero choice. So for them to say that the case has been excessively and extensively reported on, that's a bunch of bullshit. This is all a recent occurrence in the last year or so. So, honestly, there's not enough reporting on Jeffrey Epstein and his friends. Again, I ask you, where is the gigantic expose into Bill Clinton and his roles with Jeffrey Epstein, his ties with Jeffrey Epstein. Where is the charge hard attitude that the Miami Herald had when they were going after Acosta? Let's see it. Let's see them blow the doors off of this as well, because it's obvious that the media in general had no interest in any of this until very recently. The press, the government, and plaintiff have made every effort to try Miss Maxwell as a proxy for the now deceased Mr. Epstein. Nice try as framing it as that, but that's not the case. This is not a sins of my father kind of situation. Ghislaine Maxwell was extensively involved. She was a co-boss. She was running things behind the scenes, and she had just as much sway with Jeffrey Epstein, according to the survivors. So this isn't trying to put Epstein's crimes in Miss Maxwell's lap. This is making Miss Maxwell responsible for her part in those very crimes. Said the Thursday filing by Laura A. Menninger, the prejudice caused by the flood of coverage that comes with every new unsealing event in this case cannot be overstated. Well, you know what? For all these years, you operated in the shadows, nobody reported on it, and now the shoe is on the other foot. And guess what? Nobody has any empathy for you. Ghislaine Maxwell chose to do what she did. She had all of the privilege in the world, like I've said a million times, and this is what she chose to do with it. What kind of great good could have these extremely, just utterly, disgustingly wealthy individuals, what kind of good could they have done if they would have harnessed that power and that wealth into something worthwhile? Instead, it was all about collecting more power, consolidating the power that they had, and making sure that they're in control over people, asserting power over people that they feel are less than they are. So anyone who thinks that there's prejudice caused by a flood of coverage, well, it's about time, and that's just the way it goes in a case like this. Those same arguments were made unsuccessfully to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York when Maxwell challenged Preska's decision to unseal the depositions. Appellate judges held that Preska did not violate any judicial norms in reaching her decision, that there was a presumption of public access to court documents. The lawsuit was fueled by public interest in Epstein following the Miami Herald's Perversion of Justice series. And the Second Circuit Court was very clear in their ruling. And they were very clear in the way they admonished Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team. And once again, Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team find themselves in a position that is just, it's not a position that you would want to be in trying to defend your client, right? It is not a winning position, considering how much the court has basically laughed at all of their requests up to now. In another new wrinkle, Maxwell's lawyers asked Preska not to release depositions from two non-parties, referenced only as Doe 1 and Doe 2. Lawyers for these two non-parties objected to their names being released, but did not raise any further objections before a November 4th deadline. So, Maxwell doesn't want Doe 1 and 2 to have these, the depositions from these two non-parties, even though their lawyers did not voice any objection as the deadline passed. So I'm pretty sure that the court is going to just release this anyway. There was no objection made by the actual parties themselves, so I don't see how the court would step in and pass something like this because Maxwell's lawyers asked for it. Now, again, I might be wrong, right? I'm certainly not a lawyer, and I'm just trying to swim my way through these murky waters just like you, but it certainly doesn't look like a gambit that is going to prove successful. Although they did not thereafter submit any objection, this court has already ruled that an objection by Does 1 and 2 to the release of their names is itself an objection to unsealing, the filing said, seemingly challenging the unsealing orders already settled by Preska and later the appeals court. And that's where they're going to have a problem. this has already been put into motion. This is precedent already. The courts have made their rulings. So there's no, I don't see how the defense feels they're going to be able to win this here. Maxwell remains in a New York jail awaiting federal trial. She was arrested on July 2nd in New Hampshire on 4 counts of sexual trafficking of a minor and 2 counts of perjury, the latter stemming from testimony she gave in the civil lawsuit involving Roberts, which was settled in 2017. The criminal charges involved alleged recruiting and grooming of underage girls for Epstein from 1994 to 1997. She is alleged to have participated in the abuse of one of the girls. And now remember, in my opinion, those are Hold'em charges. They're just the charges that get her in jail and get this ball rolling. We know that there was activity for a lot longer period than 1994 and 1997. And again, if this non-prosecution agreement gets tossed by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals next month, we're in for a whole new world here. And all of these people that were relying on that to keep them out of the old Klinsky are going to be running for cover. Maxwell's attorneys indicated in the Thursday filing that they plan to challenge how federal prosecutors came into possession of the depositions from the civil lawsuit in the first place. This is already explored territory here, right? They've already navigated these waters, and they found the bottom to be a bit rocky as the coral reef came up and gashed their hull. So I don't know what they're doing again. Maybe they're just, drunkenly sailing their way through these waters at this point. Because the precedent has already been set, and I don't see them overturning it at this point. Maxwell's lawyers previously suggested without any evidence that Roberts' attorneys might have turned over the depositions in violation of a protective order in the civil suit. That was disputed by federal prosecutors who indicated that they obtained the depositions after asking 2 courts for access, one of which complied. So again, Ghislaine Maxwell's attorneys are looking for technicalities and loopholes. Remember that, folks. It's very important in the narrative here. It's very important to see what they're up to. They're not saying Ghislaine Maxwell's innocent. They're certainly not saying that. They're trying to find a loophole or a technicality that they can exploit that will get this draconian bipedal serpent off the hook. And so far, they've run into a brick wall. Maxwell has sued Epstein's estate, which is being settled in the U.S. Virgin Islands, claiming Epstein promised to pay her legal bills and did so up until the day he died in August 2019. The estate holds that no such deal was ever made. Yeah, and I don't think that kind of deal was made either, right? Now, they might have had some kind of handshake agreement, but we're going to need to see some receipts about all of that, because there's zero chance in my mind that Ghislaine Maxwell should have her disgusting little clause on any of the money that should be going to these survivors. Why? So she can re-victimize these gals? Hell no, not $1, not 1 day left, 1 day free from that jail, and not one more person abused. Menninger's filing on behalf of Maxwell also repeated earlier arguments that the information should be kept under seal because it could be relevant to Maxwell's criminal trial. The sealed items contain information relevant to the criminal action that may or may not later be determined inadmissible in that trial, she said. Nope, they're all records of public knowledge at this point. They're all judicial documents, as the appellate court established, and they are all part of the paperwork and the documents that should be available to the public. And so far, Preska and the Second Circuit Court of Appeals have felt the same way. So what I see here is nothing more than an attempt by Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers to earn the big dollars that they're being paid. Unfortunately for them and their client, they're not coming up with the results that they would like. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. And to all of you who have donated to the show and who enjoy the content and want to help continue the content to be produced, thank you so much. The PayPal link is also in the description box. All right, folks, I'll be back tomorrow morning, and we will see what sort of madness these morons are trying to force feed us then.